Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I am Mick Alfany. So we left off yesterday. I still have a whole lot of notes to go over. I took a lot of notes on that video and they said a lot of interesting stuff. I hope you all took the time, maybe, to go and watch that video on the International Monetary Fund's website. These things affect all of the banking coins. These decisions that they make, these pathways that they choose to take, affect all of the banking coins: XRP, XLM, Algorand, Cello. So even though I titled the video, videos XRP, it applies to all of them. Okay. Now, before we get into that, I want to give a big shout out to one of the biggest supporters of the channel, always in that comment section early. Pay me in XRP. All right. Pay me in XRP has been first so many times I can't even count. All right. So big shout out to Pay Me at XRP, champion of the year so far. All right. Don't worry, there's going to be a lot more champions getting special shout outs there. Also, I like to say, if you like the channel, you love the channel, if you appreciate what we do here, please, if you are using ad blocker, whitelist me on ad blocker. I would greatly appreciate that. So let's begin here. Holding limits. They were talking a lot about holding limits, and not only in that video. They were talking about holding limits for CBDCs in a lot of their recent PDFs. Okay, now this is something where they're sort of still on the fence because they understand and have said this, at least in that video, they said that they understand that this could be a deal breaker, right? Two things could be deal breakers for people when it comes to accepting central bank digital currencies or the utilization of central bank digital currencies. One is privacy, the privacy issue, which the Bank of International Settlements seems to have solved. They come to grips with the fact that they're not going to be able to track people openly with all of their personal information. So they have come up with a method of detaching like your name, your address from the actual information that they would require, like where you're spending it. And they're going to do that under the guise of, we want to know that it's not being used for illicit activities, right? So whatever you might believe that encompasses. That's why they're going to require certain tracking and things like that. So that's what they're going to say. But the IMF hadn't come to grips with that just yet. So that's one thing. So now they're starting to come over to the side where they're like, okay, well, maybe we're only going to track certain things in the vein of the Bank of International Settlements, keeping your name and your address, things like that, possibly private. Okay. So that was one possible deal breaker, is how they choose to go about the privacy aspect of central bank digital currencies. So the second deal breaker would be holding limits on CBDCs. So I think I touched on this in the last video, where, yeah, you can't tell me that if I put $2 million in and I want to take out my money in a digital cash, that I can only take out $500,000. That's absolutely ridiculous. So as I was saying before, with any of these liquidity tokens, with any of these bank coins, XRP, Algorand, XLM, it will help to negate that particular problem, where now you don't have to have a holding limit. The only thing is, I don't think that the IMF wants to rely so heavily on the liquidity of a non-banking financial institution. Now, why do I say that? Keep in mind, the IMF never really was so, I will say, so friendly or so open to working with the non-banking financial institutions. Who was it, if you guys remember last year, who were the originators of putting forth the idea that the central bank should be open to working with and always partnering with the non-banking financial institutions and fintechs? It was the Bank of International Settlements. And the Bank of International Settlements all last year was throwing their weight around. Every panel that they could, they were throwing their weight around. And they have a lot of power. So then it was only after much prodding that the IMF and the ECB started to come on board with the idea. And the ECB is still very standoffish about the idea. But now they're sort of seeing, hey, if we don't get on board, we're going to get taken over by this new financial system and we're going to lose out. So now they're starting to come more on board with the idea. But the IMF wasn't one of the originals, wasn't the originator of that particular idea, that notion. Now they're coming to grips with that hey, we're going to have to work with them, but we don't want to rely on them so heavily. Like, for instance, if they're pooling their money into XRP, let's take XRP as an example, They don't want to lean so heavily upon Ripple that now Ripple has power over them. That is another key thing, I'm telling you. And listen, if that were to happen and they leaned heavily on Ripple, this high price liquidity pool, so that they can always fill in the gaps of what could be lost on a bank run. Then on top of that, you're using XRPL, then XRPL is being used for payroll. Understand what Ripple is gaining is power. And with that power, of course, that makes the XRP price go a little bit higher. The more payroll that's rolling across, the more interbank payments that's rolling across, that price goes higher. As that price goes higher, of course, you and I are going to make a lot of money. But at the same time, Ripple as a company is gaining more and more power, along with a lot more money. And with money comes power as well. So all of this combined power, now Ripple is a powerhouse. Now Ripple acts as like a non-banking financial institution supervisory body. That's unbelievable. So this is what I'm talking about. When it comes to Ripple and XRP, sky is the limit because it's never been done before. There has never been a newcomer to the financial industry that stands to gain this much power and this much money that quickly. Now, I know to the lay person, someone might say, well, 10 years, 15 years, even 5 years is a lot for some people. Wow, you must not have ever been in the stock market and long held before, because I'll tell you, so 5 years is nothing. But even 5 years is a very quick time to amass that type of money and that type of power. So the IMF sees that. They don't want anyone having a leg up on them. They like to wield their power and call the shots. You saw what they did with El Salvador, didn't you? Right? They don't like Bitcoin at all. I'm telling you this. So they might make money with Bitcoin. They may have to have Bitcoin at their bank or something like that. Who knows? They're forced to do it. They understand the game of money. They understand sometimes you may have to partner with things you don't want to partner with. But when El Salvador started using Bitcoin, even though they're really using Algorand, they're running it all across Algorand via, I believe, Coinbanks. The company Coinbanks is actually setting up Algorand infrastructure for Bitcoin to be utilized across, right? So it's really like wrap the Bitcoin or something like that, but or whatever you're going to call that. But nevertheless, they didn't want them using Bitcoin. And what did they do? Because the IMF leverages the loans that they give out and the money that they give out, whatever it is, they hold that against you to say, hey, listen, if we're going to be helping you, you're going to listen to us. Hence, their title as a supervisory body is not just with commercial banks. It's with countries, governments. So the IMF doing that with everyone else, they like to wield that power. They don't want to have someone else over them like Ripple wielding that very same power. Now, keep in mind, the IMF, according to the World Economic Forum, the IMF were the first ones to try to make a one world agnostic currency. Look up. Here's a little research for you. I try to give you guys some things so you could do your own research. It's good to have the knowledge for yourself and see it for yourself. But you could do a Google search for World Economic Forum, SDR, one world currency, and read what pops up, okay? The IMF first came up with the SDR as a type of one world currency, but for whatever reason, it didn't work out. So now the IMF just uses SDRs between the central banks, right? Which has worked out well for them. But they were the first ones to attempt it. What Ripple is doing is they have what is like an SDR on steroids with XRP. So they're the new, Ripple literally it's possible for Ripple to become like the new IMF. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be the new IMF. I'm saying to become like the new IMF. It's a company who is a for-profit company, a non-banking financial institution, which they could be a banking institution if they really wanted to. They could always file paperwork and things like that and go through the processes, but they probably don't want to. But who has created a one world agnostic bridge currency. It just happens that XRP can do so much more. So now with that being kept in mind, look how much power the IMF has. They didn't always have that. All right. Ripple has a strong backing from many banks around the world. With that type of backing and the partnerships they have and the money that they can accumulate and what XRP and the XRPL can do, they stand to gain a lot of power. There's a power struggle going on here. All right. So yes, of course, generational wealth is definitely on the table, depending on how much XRP you have, of course. And if everything goes according to plan, there's no guarantees. I'm not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice, but we're talking about mind-blowing money, both for XRP holders, possibly, and also Ripple, possibly, okay? The IMF does not like that. They don't want a supervisor. Some of you are scoffing at that very notion, but look at how it works. If you control an entity's payroll, if you control an entity's liquidity, if you control how much money, exponential money, an entity can make, you control them. You're more than a supervisor. You rule over that particular entity. That's major. So what the IMF here is trying to do is they're trying to get out ahead of this problem and mitigate how much power whichever NBFIs they're working with have over them. Now, a similar problem was had by the legacy system intermediaries. And this is another thing. Well, this is not so much the IMF, but the commercial banks have this problem. The commercial banks have for a long time been getting pretty much robbed at gunpoint by the intermediaries. Those high intermediary fees have taken much money from the banking system, hence why the banking system has become so predatory. Okay, high fees on everything, high fees on these particular accounts, high fees if you only have this much money in a particular account. They're lending out your money, they don't have money on hand. It has made the system, not only damaged the system, but it made the system desperate to make money. That's the relationship between the commercial banks and the legacy system intermediaries. Now, what all of the banks together want to avoid is another more powerful version of the legacy system intermediaries. Now, see, the IMF, I just gave you an example with the commercial banks. The IMF doesn't want someone above them that's going to do to them what the intermediaries, legacy system intermediaries, were doing to the commercial banks. The central banks don't want that. Now, it's very interesting that the Bank of International Settlements is actually very comfortable working with the non-banking financial institutions and the fintechs, but I believe they have more of a grasp on how to balance that relationship and maintain their prestige and power. Whereas the IMF is a little bit more on shaky grounds because they know that so many governments, countries, commercial banks, they resent the IMF for how the IMF wields its power. And I told you, they wield their power like a strict parent. Take El Salvador as an example, okay? And they just did it again recently with someone else. I can't remember the other country, but it was someone else. They do this all the time. So they understand that resentment will make people turn against them, okay? So the people, if, let's say, Ripple or Algorand, as an example, gain too much power, the people will go directly to them. And who could stop Ripple if they gain too much power? Right? No one could stop them if they gain too much power. If they're acting as a supervisory entity to the IMF, they could do to the IMF what the IMF does to every other country. Correct? Right? So the IMF says, hey, we're giving you loans, we're giving you money, we're giving you infrastructure, we're helping you run payroll or whatever. We send these intermediaries to you. That's our connections. That's our partners. So you're going to have to listen to us. Guess what? Ripple will be able to do the exact same thing. They don't like that. They don't want that. That frightens them. That's why they brought this up so many times, right? I wrote it twice, holding limits on CBDCs to prevent sudden outflows of bank deposits. And then I wrote it a second time here. They iterated in a different way. Limits. Okay, so they wrote this, they said this little bit here that was a little bit interesting. Limits help people meet desire for privacy while guarding against illicit finance. So they iterated this many, many times. Now, they want to maintain that control. When they say something like this, it has nothing to do with solving illicit practices. They can't do it now with cash or fiat currencies. They can't do it with paper tender is what I'm saying, right? Because once that paper tender is in somebody's hand, they can do whatever they want with it, right? So they can't even do that now. But what it is a measure of control. They're telling you, hey, we want to control a little piece of this. Hey, we're going to tell you what you can and can't do. It has nothing to do with solving an issue. It has everything to do with maintenance of power. There's a power struggle here. There's a power grab here. So yeah, there's a lot of money on the line. There's quadrillions on the line. And if you want to go to a lesser extent, okay, a more reasonable extent that's easier for people to grasp, there's trillions on the line. That is not a joke. That is very serious. Do your own research, okay? How much is each interbank payment, the average interbank payment, and what is the volume, the average volume on interbank payments? You can obtain these PDFs and these documents very easily. You can get the quarterly, the Q1 reports, Q2, the annual reports. All of the banks do it, okay? And then you look up which banks are working with Ripple and potentially utilizing the XRPL. Then on top of the banks, commercial as well as central, you see what projects the different banks worked on. Then you can look at which governments are looking at using the particular protocol for payroll, things of that nature, right? And of course, if you're setting up infrastructure for governments, they're going to be doing a lot more than just payroll, right? Correct? Okay. So there is a lot going on. All right. So I just released another video in the members only section. I went over some very interesting things there. It wasn't my typical video because there were some important things that I grasped from these, not just the IMF video, but if you read the last few IMF PDFs, I mean, there's something that they're bringing up that people should know if you're making quick money plays. If you're taking money out of your XRP, you're taking money out of your bank coins and you're moving it around. Some people do that. I don't do that. And they're moving it around to grow it exponentially in a quick money play and then pulling it out and putting it back into bank coins. Listen, you want to go watch that video. You want to watch that video in there, okay? Oh yeah, also, let me just close it out with this, with some of the members only content. So I put out a lot of links and PDFs and things like that in order to see those, because unless you scroll down your homepage and you see it, then you might just pass it on by. It might get buried underneath a bunch of other videos and documents. You have to go to my channel, right? And go to that community tab on my channel, scroll down, you're gonna see all the members only content right there, PDFs, links, and there's a lot of important stuff coming up. You can click those links and you'll be able to view certain things. You'll be able to go to certain things, okay? And they're time sensitive. Then also you can find the members only video content there as well. So everything can be always found in that communities tab on my channel. Okay, you go to my channel, click that little communities tab, scroll down, and I believe there is where you find the members only content. So there is so much going on. So we have a whole lot more to cover here. We're going to come back tomorrow. I have some Algorand content to catch up on. We're going to get a nice Algorand video. Another XRP video. We have so much to cover. A general video also on just the bank coins. I might just make that a members only video. So now that you have that information, what are you going to do with it? Listen, what we are on right now is bigger than I think most people know when it comes to XRP, Algorand, XLM, the potentiality of these particular things. There is a power shift. There's a new financial system coming. Listen, there was did I read this part? Just give me one moment. Bear with me, please. Okay, so I think I read it yesterday. They literally said in their video that CBDCs, this is what the IMF was saying, that the federal government told them, of the United States told them. And remember, this is a video that they're speaking on that's hosted by the Atlantic Council. You have to take this serious. They said that CBDCs could fundamentally change the structure of the USA financial system. If you paraphrase that, that means there's a new financial system on the horizon. And if we're providing the liquidity for that, if we're holding one of the liquidity tokens for that, even that is beyond huge. Also, keep in mind, let's say you have 20 coins, right? Because some people say, well, what about closed ecosystems? Let's say you have 20 coins. Right? And this closed ecosystem needs 10 of those coins. They take their 10, you're never going to see those again. It's in the closed ecosystem, is theirs now. That leaves only 10 coins. That means those coins are more rare than ever. That means that the value shoots through the roof. So no matter what, bank coin holders, if everything goes according to plan and all these foundations continue to work hard and do good partnerships, the future is extremely bright. So now that you have that information, what are you going to do with it? I know what I'm going to do with it. So until next time, let's get to the money.